Chapter 2. Together at the Austrian court. The stream of inheritance had left Jadwiga its mysteriously complex gift. Daily now, environment was determining her development within those inexorable lines already set. Through her father, what secretly selected, long-carried seeds were sown in her blood? What measure of the imaginative fervor, the mystic rapture of St. Louis had she received? Some of the greatest names in the world of letters were united with those of her Angevin ancestors, one of whom was able to say to Dante in Il Paradiso, "Sufficiently thou lovest me." Had she her father's capacities, his vigor, perhaps his excessive ardor? For while King Louis's years were marked by admirable accomplishments, at times an almost fanatical zeal stained them. From the pious of Poland, her great-uncle Casimir, and her grandmother Elizabeth, what heritage of mental and physical virility was hers? From her gay, warm-hearted mother, what capacity for loving? And from all, what ancestral sense of race, of dynastic and religious duty, to hold her ship steady on a stormy course? Already, some thought that they could read, at least partially, answers to these questions. One of the influences of the impressionable years immediately following the Hainburg ceremony came out of Austria. After the formal betrothal, according to custom, each child was to live for some time with the family of the other, partly as hostage, partly as pupil. This took William to Hungary and Jadwiga to Austria. In Vienna, they chattered German instead of Hungarian. Fortunately, there, they were not so much under the guidance of William's father, Leopold, and his mother, a daughter of the cruel Viscountess of Milan, as under that of William's dispossessed uncle, picturesque Duke Albert III. Leopold's appetite for kingship was more typical of his age than Albert's. The peace lover, Albert was called. Chroniclers like to record the fact that he wore his hair in a queue, to credit him with having started that mode in France. Albert must have found pleasure in superintending the education of his protégés. His nephew, the fair, frail William, had been so apt in learning knightly manners and court etiquette that he was already called the elegant prince. His quick understanding and sensitiveness endeared him to all. What sight could better please the eyes than that of this boy paired with the vivid Jadwiga of Buda, this high-spirited, clear-eyed girl, whose wealth of chestnut-colored hair waved back from a forehead that suggested a mind ready for rich furnishing. This was the period of early Gothic in Austria. Noise of hammers and chisels filled the air. Habsburg rulers were laying the foundations of the beautiful capital Vienna was to become. The Minorite church already thrilled the city. St. Stephen's Cathedral was growing. Duke Albert was having busts of himself and his wife set above one of its portals. He was an ardent student, and was busy creating schools and zoological parks, having religious manuscripts exquisitely illustrated, botanies too, trying to find out all that was known in science and art. He must often have lingered with the young people in front of the wooden cabinet, which was his library. It would have been difficult to find more richly laden shelves in any other chateau in Europe. Sitting before them, Jadwiga and William held in their hands and turned the pages of such treasures as his book of the Four Evangelists, written in purest gold. Their favorite singer on the court programs was that chevalier of influence, the historian poet Sukenwert, who was a frequent sojourner, too, at the Hungarian court, and knew many lands and peoples. Indeed, scarcely a week passed without the arrival of some singing chronicler, who had already been Jadwiga's friend at Buda and Visegrad. Such visitors always offered especial entertainment to King Louis's daughters. And with what comparative ease men traveled, despite poor roads. Happily, too, Latin was a true international language, and a common language was of far greater importance than roads free of dust and mud. It was only in traveling slowly that one could learn. Long journeys on horse and on foot, and time spent enjoying the hospitality of convent and court gave opportunity for discussion and reflection. With printing yet unknown, there was a constant call to discover facts for oneself. Moreover, the continual traveling was born of a deeper restlessness. Europe had not yet settled down after the Crusades, and great ethnic bodies were still feeling their way to geographic stability. What a fascinating earth to live on, despite the fact that so much of it was still undiscovered. Yet for another century, oceans were to hide the Americas, a world inheriting the civilization of Asia and Africa, and Greece and Rome did not seem limited. Many epochs, which to us are closed books, were for Jadwiga's people richly written. They thought not in terms of parochial frontiers, but in those of the Catholic Church, ever spreading toward universal boundaries. Hungarian Cistercian, or Franciscan, was brother to his brothers in cloisters in other lands and exchanged visits with them. This religious orientation, joined to the extraordinary political conception of the Holy Roman Empire, made the developing world a place of boundless horizons. Though the prestige of each was waning, the papacy and the empire were still the two omnipresent influences of the time. However, beneath this specious unity, surging up from the bottom was the new growth, which was blossoming in vernacular languages and in the lusty individuality of the cities. This, then, was a world in movement. Did a teacher win success in a certain town? Students gathered from far and near to sit at his feet. Was such an event as the Hainburg ceremony about to be celebrated? Pilgrim bands of every description set forth to witness it. Indeed, had somebody asked Jadwiga where her father, the king, lived, she could not have answered in one word. He preferred, to be sure, his visagrated palaces above the river in summer, and those at the capital, Buda, in winter. But he might be found making long sojourns at any one of a dozen of his seats scattered about the kingdom, holding a council here or a court there, signing a document far from the capital. And all this was quite aside from far-flung military and crusading exploits which might lead him on expeditions against northern Lithuania, or southern Venice, or to wars in the Balkans, which would last for months. At the Vienna court, as elsewhere, there was a current events department. Suckenwert was at once poet and pressman. Legends of the past, news of the contemporary day equally crowded his narration. Two contemporary happenings filled the world with their repercussions. All Europe fixed its attention on the recent deaths of Pope Gregory XI and of Charles IV, Kaiser of the Holy Roman Empire. And now Christians, in a church divided against itself, watched with conflicting interest the strange drama in progress at Rome. In the hope of silencing the two rival popes, who were thundering anathemas at each other, St. Catherine of Siena had gone to the Holy City, and without money, but with secretaries and 7 sisters of penance, had taken up her abode in the Via di Papa. From there, while she exhorted the new Pope Urban VI to curb the violence of his temper, she launched her eloquent appeals to all Christian nations to turn their backs on Avignon and the false Pope, Clement VII, and to support Rome and Urban VI. Especially, she was hoping to win over the notorious Queen Joanna of Naples, an ally of Clement. And to that end, she had written Jadwiga's father, who hated Joanna, responsible for the murder of his brother. Much good will result from your coming hither. Perhaps the true cause will triumph without the use of physical force, and the deluded queen may be rescued from her obstinate perversion either by fear or by love. You are well aware how the Christ has spared her hitherto, being unwilling to deprive her actually of that which by her conduct she has forfeited. He has awaited her repentance out of consideration of you and your family. In response, King Louis and Queen Elizabeth had sent Urban a magnificent present of jewels to make up for the loss of those which the cardinals had carried off to Avignon. But, children as they were, William and Jadwiga at Vienna must have found far more interesting the tales of war and of the still unforgotten Crusades. and enthralling too the dramatic recitals of that crusade, which belong not to older days, but to their own time. Hour after hour, Sukenwert recounted adventures of the Teutonic Knights, soldiers of Christ, and members of an order which, having early made the great adventure in the Holy Land and later retreated sullenly, sword in hand, before the Ottoman infidel, had now removed from the brilliant east to the dark and gloomy north. They wore casques tufted with peacock feathers, and long white capes emblazoned with black crosses, and had their chief strongholds at Königsberg and Marienburg near the Baltic shore. From these fortress palaces they conducted one crusade after another into the country of the Lithuanians, that powerful people who still worshipped the god of thunder and the sacred serpent. Their possessions, lying northeast and southeast of Poland, had been vastly increased in recent years by their leader, Duke Algirdas, called the Terror of the Rus. Jadwiga's father had gone on a crusade against them, in memory of which his royal sword still hung in the honor hall at Königsberg. Recently, Duke Albert himself had started forth, accompanied by 2,000 men on horseback, to share with the Teutonic Knights another crusade against these Saracens of the north. On his way, he had given chivalric feats in honor of women in Breslau and Thorn, and other German cities, and had been himself sumptuously welcomed by the Grand Master at Königsberg. No court in Europe was set against a background of greater splendor than that of these knights, who had developed worldly ambition and were now a formidable secular power, controlling large Baltic territories and many cities. The world, people believed, could not match their Marienburg fortress on the banks of the Nogat, which branched off from the Vistula at its Baltic delta. To those sailing in barges down the river, the order's towers and gigantic walls lifting one above the other were visible from a great distance. The more eastern Königsberg seat was less imposing, though it was strategically important. It was from there that Duke Albert and his hosts, with united forces, had advanced into pagan Lithuania to burn and punish on infidel soil. During 8 days they harried the land of Algirdas and his 12 warrior sons, amongst whom they most feared the 7th, Jadwiga, a believer in amulets and in his predestined luck in war. As the child lovers sat shiveringly following Sukenwert's recital of crusades against the northern pagans, was there some strange premonitory sense that chilled the eagerness with which little Jadwiga's betrothed, half-married prince of the Habsburgs listened?